Hello, everyone. This is the Gridiron Review. I'm Zach, that's Jack, and the trade that the whole league was waiting on finally happened. Deshaun Watson was traded to the Cleveland Browns for 3 firsts, among other picks, and then he was handed the biggest guaranteed contract you've ever seen, and maybe we'll see for a long time. I can't imagine another player tops that for a while. We're just going to jump right in, and there's a quick disclaimer. We are not going to comment on the legality, the PR look of it. This is purely analyzing the football aspects, and that's all. But without, going too far into that, because that's what, the Twitterverse is for, and that's for the NFL to decide about how they feel about it, and that's for the civil trials, all that stuff. We are not legal experts or anything of that nature. We're just going to talk about it from a purely football standpoint. And now, Jack, you can begin us here.
So just real quick, building off what he said, is we are not lawyers. We are not going to be handing down the punishment for Watson. We are by no means anything that should be commenting on this. That is for formality, and whatever happens, maybe we touch on that later, but this is football talk and how everything went down and the package for him and all that type of stuff. But just on the details that Zach was talking about, it was 3 first-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, and a 4th-round pick this year, and they gave up a 5th-round pick with Watson. Now, this move seems to be good for both teams. I think it's just interesting to start with the fact that the Browns are going to Brown. This is a team that back in 2017 took Myles Garrett with the 1st overall pick, and no one is ever going to question why you did that. However, you originally had pick 12, and that's where Watson ended up being taken after that pick was traded, originally to the Eagles and then to the Texans. But you also had pick 25, so in reality, you could have come back up and tried to take a quarterback. I mean, obviously, Trubisky went at 2, but you could have gotten Watson, you could have gotten Mahomes, whatever. But for a team that was told that they were out of the running for Deshaun Watson, you really pissed off the only guy that was capable of playing decent football for the Cleveland Browns in the last X amount of years. You had him write a thank you letter and all this stuff, and all you did was enter a sweepstakes. Now, yes, in the end, you did end up with Watson, but for you to go out, and I get that Baker has had a very up and down career and that his play last year probably was on the decline because of his injury and whatever you want to say. The fact is you almost completely screwed yourselves over. And Zach, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I will be the first to admit I really didn't see the Browns being the choice of all the teams listed. I still felt like even when the Browns were eliminated that the dark horse would have been the Eagles. Purely from Watson's standpoint, I don't understand. I mean, the Browns have a talented team, sure, but they're going to a very competitive division. He's going to have added expectations because Cleveland just hasn't had that much success. I mean, as Jack said, he's not even a Baker fan, and yet Baker is one of the most stable quarterback play they've had in forever. And that shows you how bad it's been considering the public opinion on Baker. And, the Browns go out and say that they don't want a child at quarterback, and then they go get Watson. That's not going to look good. Again, we're not going to comment on that, but it's more about just the front office handling Baker has been fumbled. I think the cardinal rule should be, and this might be my opinion, you support your quarterback until he's not your quarterback anymore. And, you've seen the Eagles supported – we're not Jalen Hurts fans. Again, we'll say it every time. But they did not down him the whole time, and yet they were in the running for Watson. They were in the running for Russell Wilson. So there's a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. And the Browns certainly seem like they did not handle it well. And, you have Jarvis Landry come out and say he doesn't want to play for Cleveland, that they're not the organization he wants to be a part of. And, the list goes on, that the Cleveland dysfunction it continues decade after decade, year after year, even when it looked like they were on the up and up with a dominant defense and one of the, if not the best running back room in the league. And it fell apart. And if they're going to trade Baker, and reports are that the Seahawks are interested and the Colts are interested, which if you're the Colts, that's about all you can do. That's the only move left. I mean, I guess if you want Garoppolo, but, the Colts going from Wentz to Baker is kind of like whatever. I mean, it's probably a lateral move, so all that shit talking on Wentz is just going to go right back to Baker. But anyway, we're not discussing that too much in this one. I mean, we can, but it's just obviously when you can go out and get a talent purely based on a talent perspective of Watson, you do it, but you don't drag your quarterback through the mud. And it's even worse when you go out and get a quarterback with as much negative PR as Watson has. So I guess it's hard to talk about this and not bring in at least somewhat the whole reason he is tradable. But if he's on the field, then the Amari Cooper trade makes more sense in a way, although it's still not like anything crazy. And now, like, my question is, do they change the whole offense? Do you trade one of your running backs? Do you there's so many questions now, and I guess they're good questions to have because you went out and got a top 5 quarterback in the league when he's on the field. But it just, I don't know. I mean, they kind of came out of nowhere. I definitely didn't believe that was going to be the team. I thought they were probably like 5th or 6th on my list. And, give them credit. The only thing I can say is I think Jackson had a report that Watson was close to going to Philly, but that him and Hurts share a trainer. And that's, he didn't want feelings hurt. If I'm Philly, what are you doing? Are you seriously caring about this? Feelings getting hurt? This is why you guys are going to regress and go back to being a middle-of-the-road team. Jack, you can take over while I gather my thoughts here.
So circling back to Baker, I think it's interesting. I know that Baker came out first and said that Indy was the team that he wanted to go to, but if Indy really goes out and gets this guy that was also drugged through the dirt, which I think is just – and they give up a day 2 pick. I mean, the first thought there is, how do you still end up with a day 2 pick for guys that are getting like almost just dragged through the mud? Like, it's kind of ridiculous that you can talk all this nonsense on your quarterback and you can still come out with a round 2 or a round 3 pick. And I get that their play is worth it, but you would think that all these reports coming out have something to do with would lower the price a little bit. I think when you look at Jordan Love, it'll be interesting to see if he gets moved, what are you getting for him? Because his name hasn't been praised this offseason either. But building off what Zach said about the current Browns as they are now is you bring in Amari Cooper, you bring in Deshaun Watson, but your team is built to run. So does it even make sense to keep both Chubb and Kareem Hunt? Is one of them movable in the draft, or even right now for a different piece? Like, personally, I think if you're going to run a more balanced or even pass first offense, is you move Chubb. And we talked about this a little bit last night, just in terms of the money aspect of it and the contracts. And Chubb signed a 3-year, $36, I believe, $1 million extension last offseason. And do you try to dump that cap because you're only paying Kareem Hunt, I think it's like $8 million. I think it was like a 2-year, $16 million contract for him or whatever. And I think that Chubb is an underrated pass catcher, but at the same time, Kareem Hunt fits what a balanced offense needs. and you saw it while he was in Kansas City. So do you trade Chubb to a team that needs a running back to succeed? Do you would a team like the Jets be interested, who just signed 2 tight ends in Uzoma and Conklin? Would Tampa be interested, who hasn't re-signed Fournette or Rojo? I mean, it's all question marks right now, and I think that right now the problem with the Browns is that when it's not one issue, it's another. And Jarvis Landry coming out and saying that he didn't want to play for the organization because of various issues such as being forced to play through injury or whatever it is not a good look for them. Why, if a player is coming out and saying that, would you ever want to play for them? And you even take it a step further and look at OBJ, and I get that it's a run for his team, but he wasn't producing, and I'm not an OBJ fan by any means. I think that he is highly overrated, and I get that's a hot take, but he wasn't producing, and he had the same amount of yards in his time with the Rams this year than he did in Cleveland. But the thing about Watson going to the Eagles, I don't know what the truth is behind it. But as I told Zach, this is a business. If you're worried about friendships, that's all well and good because you share a trainer and the this and that and the other thing. And I get that Cleveland, Watson could step in and go win a title with them. The problem is that the Saints, or Falcons, and Panthers were the noticeable teams being talked about. And Philly is this underlier because Deshaun Watson wants to go to location. But, like, I had originally heard that Watson wanted a team with a good O-line, at least a decent defense, and weapons to throw to, or whatever his demands were. And that was the Eagles. The Eagles aren't the best defense, but they have the pieces there. Their O-line play has been solid for years. And maybe you could have packaged Cooks, or even now the Eagles can still go out and get a guy like Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf or Andy Isabella, whoever's on the block, and shore up that room for Watson. And for the reasons that these other teams were falling out, like Atlanta didn't end up with them because they told him that they couldn't get him help until 2023. The Eagles have a decent amount of help there. The Panthers wouldn't guarantee the contract in years 3 and 4 or whatever happened there. And, I mean, he got a 5-year, $230 million extension, fully guaranteed. And to Zach's point, we may never see that again. That's wild. But it's also probably the reason the Browns ended up with him. And the Saints, I mean, you would have – I think we talked about this before. You would have had to give up so many pieces of that team as well as the future to go get Watson. So that wasn't a place to be either. So I guess in the end, maybe Cleveland was the best place, but you're telling me that Philly, who has I guess it's debatable on the fan bases between Cleveland and Philly, but Philly just seems like a place that Watson would fit in with a running back committee that isn't necessarily full of movable pieces, and Devontae Smith, and just the capital. First off, they have 3 first-round picks this year. I don't know how it gets much better than that, and I get that the Eagles would still have to give at least 2 of those up, but if you can keep one, you go get Watson weapons. Zach, you still gathering your thoughts?
No, it just first I want to pivot around to the Texans. Props to them for trading such a hot topicked player, for lack of a better term, one that would certainly have had, controversial, and getting everything that they said they wanted. They got their 3 firsts, and they're going to commit to Davis Mills, it sounds like, or at least give him a chance, and that's good. Roll with your guy that you found in the 3rd round. That could be something good. That's why you take quarterbacks in the 3rd round. You take those guys, the Kellen Monds, the Davis Mills, the Dak Prescott's, the Russell Wilsons. Not that they were all 3rd round. I'm honestly not sure, but you take these guys that have the upside and, for one way or another are not first round prospects. Davis Mills barely played between COVID and injury. So you took a chance and he showed that he has at least average starter potential. So now you can start building a team that has no talent across the board with 3 more firsts than you had before. And, it's for at a time, you sat and you refused to do it. You refused to trade. You stayed where you wanted. I'm trying to think of the phrase. Like you stayed firm. There you go. And you didn't trade for less, and you got what I assume they would have been looking for the whole time. And, again, in a way, credit to Cleveland. They didn't trade any players. They didn't give up any of the young pieces on the defense. They didn't give up any offensive linemen. They didn't give up any of their running backs. So now they have more tradable assets. They didn't give up Baker. So they should recoup one of those picks back that they traded, probably a second. I would assume it's a second rounder. If it's a third, then I think that's a pretty good deal for whoever sends it. And, you have to live with this if you're Cleveland. If you don't win a Super Bowl, this could be an all-time disaster of a trade for so many reasons, for the guaranteed money, for the look, for everything. So it's got to be Super Bowl or bust in like the next 2 years, in my eyes, maybe even 3.
I mean, on the surface, this is a good trade for both teams, but I mean, you're digging a little deeper here, and the Texans got a nice package back. But now, do you regret signing Lovie Smith? Is he the guy that's going to actually use those picks in the way that they should be? And I get that every team looks at prospects differently. Every analyst looks at prospects differently. But if Lovie Smith reaches or makes a pick that is just like consensusly bad, you basically just botched your trade, especially if Cleveland goes and wins a Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's true. It is a little curious that they went and they hired Lovie Smith to, I guess, oversee this. That they really, I mean, it's Houston. They fired Culley after they seem to have started the rebuild, although one could argue they started even before that. And with the trade of Hopkins, it's definitely weird how they're going about it. They're making the right moves, I would say, but at the same time, you wouldn't think Lovie Smith is there, but maybe he is there for 5 years. I mean, it doesn't feel like it. I mean, at least with the current trend in the NFL where you go hire the exciting young coach and let him mold a team. But, the problem is that Houston won't be ready for at least 2 years, maybe even longer, realistically speaking.
I mean, I agree, but the problem right now is that you haven't made moves. You just lost the only name that people knew on your defense, but you're out here re-signing Christian Kirksey and Camus Grugier-Hill, and you're talking about building around Davis Mills, but all you've done is get rid of Deshaun Watson. I don't think they've made any moves that significantly make this team any better than they were last year.
Yeah, you got a point there. To my knowledge, they could have signed, like, I know they have Brevin Jordan, but you could have signed, OJ Howard or Gerald Everett or any of these guys, and you didn't. You could have signed, any of the receivers. If I'm Houston, send a 4th-round pick for Andy Isabella. Send a 5th-round pick for Andy Isabella. They said he wants to trade. I don't know what it would take, but you got to find.
Even if you player swap Isabella and Cooks, because you've already told the world that you want Cooks out. So I doubt Cooks comes back and plays for you, but he's definitely out of there by the end of the draft.
I would agree. You got to make a move. You got to. They signed. I'm just checking through real quick. They signed Kyle Allen. They signed Royce Freeman. They signed Dare Ogunbowale or
Ogunbowale.
Yeah, that's it. That's the only they've added on the
And
offense.
Royce Freeman was there last year. So what are you doing? Like, especially if you trade Cooks away, what is the return? And is it going to be used correctly? Because right now Davis Mills is standing in there with the same line and the same weapons and the same defense minus Justin Reed. And it's like, how do you expect the kid to win? This is the problem with young quarterbacks is, especially with a team like this, and you look at the same instance with Trevor Lawrence, who was the first overall pick in Jacksonville. And you could say that they surrounded him with weapons, but let's be real here. That doesn't count. But the point I'm trying to make here is that Mills definitely has potential. He was a guy that late in last year's draft process was mentioned as a possible reach pick in the first round or early second. And yeah, he went, I think you said in the third, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's potential there. And if you're not going to surround him, he's going to lose any chance that he has of saying a starter in this league because you refuse to help him. And all these big free agents are already off the board. I get that there's a couple left, but are you really just going to build through the draft?
I mean, I would even argue that how are you going to attract any of the big free agents remaining? Julio, I'm not a Julio fan. He's not going to go to Houston. I can't imagine Jarvis Landry leaves Cleveland for Houston. You're going to have to – the chance to take on these guys that want to prove something, the Gerald Everetts of the world, the O.J. Howards, is gone. Like, they're all off the board.
I was going to say, the only thing you could attract people with there is money. But Lovie Smith isn't that guy that's going to attract people. Like Josh McDaniels, Brian Dable, a bunch of these guys, Hackett, that were all signed this offseason, or it at least bring some interest to the team.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the available free agents, and it's for the most part. I mean, maybe you convince Jamison Crowder, but is he really like?
Is he really straight over Cooks? I wouldn't think so.
Well, I think they move Cooks.
But that's the point. If you bring in Crowder and lose Cooks, it's probably a downgrade.
Yeah, I would agree. So you're going to be patching up this receiver room with guys like D.D. Westbrook or DeMarcus Robinson, going through the list, Dante Pettis is there, Traquan Smith, all these guys that just Marquez Valdez-Scantling, like these guys are all potential, I guess, but some of them are busts or guys that just didn't live up to their draft hype, and that's how you want to build on your potential steal in the third round. Like you had to go out and make a splash move, like. Look at Detroit, They made the right hire at Dan Campbell. You got DJ Chark to go there for 1 year. He passed up longer-term deals to go play for Dan Campbell for a year.
For $10 million nonetheless.
Yeah. You don't think Davis Mills and Jared Goff are on a similar standing ground at quarterback? Of course they are. So you could have had DJ Chark if no disrespect to Lovie Smith, but there's nothing to bring these, guys that have something to prove that aren't going to go to the big market teams or that may not want to. You don't even have the attractive head coach from an offensive perspective. Maybe Lovie Smith is able to get some defensive guys in, but they haven't done anything. So they get, what is it, the 13th pick or the 16th pick, something like that. I'm trying to think what Cleveland's
14, I think.
So, okay, you take a receiver and you take another receiver, but there's still so many holes on this offense. I mean, it's a good start, but then your defense is still crap. Like, it just – they made one right move in a sea of bad moves. And what's been the Watson trade is going to be the highlight of their offseason most likely, but it's going to overshadow the fact that they've remained very quiet during free agency. You're telling me you can't go out and get Leonard Fournette is a bad example, but get a running back to take pressure off because David Johnson and Dare Ogunbowale and Royce Freeman are not it. Like,
well, that's what I was gonna say too. Is you re-sign Freeman and you bring in Dare Ogunbowale from the Jags on top of, I assume Burkhead is still there, and now you're probably not even in the running back talks because for them it's quantity over quality. They're not going to find a 3-down back. The problem is you could have. Leonard Fournette is still sitting there. So why are you focused on re-signing a Royce Freeman and a Dare Ogunbowale who, if you're not a real in-depth football fan, don't know who he is?
I don't know. It just It doesn't like I don't know. It doesn't make sense. You say you want to build around Davis Mills. Okay, so let's say you do draft two receivers and you trade Brandon Cooks, whether you get a pick or you swap him for a player, who knows? But you still have offensive line troubles. You still have no tight end. I'm not, Brevin Jordan's probably good, but he was a fourth round or fifth round pick. So, like, it's not like it's just, and beyond him, there's probably no tight ends in the room. Like,
But it goes
it doesn't,
back to Cleveland switching their system. Instead of asking for all these picks, why aren't you asking for Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt, a guy that can take pressure off in the run game? Because David Johnson wasn't it last year. As much as I wanted to believe he was going to have a resurgence, he didn't. Burkhead had like one good game out of however many he played in, and the injury is still a risk for him. And apparently Royce Freeman played all 16 games or 17 games, but his name never came up in anything, so clearly it wasn't impressive play. So why are you not asking Cleveland for players? Unless Cleveland was saying, like, we're willing to give you all the capital in the world, don't touch our roster. But that doesn't make any sense either, because Cleveland is another team who seems to be rumored around all these big free agents, but at the end of the day, they still need help. Myles Garrett has been rushing the passer by himself since he came into the league. You're telling me you couldn't lure in Chandler Jones or any of these guys? And I get that you bring in Taven Bryan and Winovich, which I think are two fairly under the radar moves, but Myles Garrett is probably sitting there like, TJ Watt's got Cam Hayward and Tuitt and Hightower, and Zadarius had Preston and Gary and Kenny Clark. All these guys seem to have people around him, and Myles Garrett is literally sitting there by himself.
yeah, like Cleveland, it's a big move. It's probably, I think Baker got, much like Wentz, I think Baker gets an unfair amount of criticism. I think, they call him a child, but he also played with a torn rotator cuff in his throwing shoulder. How many people?
But that goes back to the Jarvis Landry thing. He could have been like, I need to get surgery now, and they could have been like, no, you're no.
Yeah, we don't know what went down there, but one thing you can't say about Baker is he plays hard. To call him a child is, I mean, maybe he is immature. We're not in we're not in the locker room, but for a guy played with like what, 4 injuries, and maybe it wasn't pretty, but it just, you go out and you get Watson. They're probably still, without knowing what Trubisky is going to give you if you're Pittsburgh, they're still borderline third in the division, maybe even fourth if Baltimore decides to stop screwing around and opening up the offense. Because you could argue that Baltimore with Lamar, and their defense is always good there, no matter who's in place. Pittsburgh has the offensive pieces. If Trubisky is better than he was with Chicago, it shouldn't be difficult. And obviously Cincinnati just went out and signed La'el Collins today, so they're 3 new starting linemen out of 5, and they still have a first-round pick that's probably going to be a lineman. So, you see all them making the right moves, and yes, Watson is a big upgrade over Baker, but you brought on a bunch of negative PR that will probably last for a long time. You trade away a ton of draft assets, and now with that new contract, you're going to cash trap yourself at some point. So you're going to have to try and sign your free agents now and, hope that it works out. Zadarius should have been signed by now. Chandler Jones should have been signed by now.
Chandler Jones is signed.
I mean by Cleveland.
Gotcha.
No, I know. The Raiders went out and got him. Look at the Raiders. They had Yannick Ngakoue, a fine pass rusher. Chandler Jones is an upgrade. So they trade Yannick. They get a cornerback in return and a weak cornerback.
But even Cleveland could have given up something for Yannick Ngakoue, for that matter. That's an upgrade on anything Garrett's had.
They could have sent Grady Williams, or I don't, obviously not Denzel Ward, but they could have sent something for Ngakoue. Like, why aren't you doing this? I really like the Winovich trade and the Taven Bryan signing, because those are low cost, pretty big upside guys, and you just need a guy that Stop taking chances on these players. Stop getting the Clownies of the world, hoping they pan out. Go get a guy that can do it.
But that's the problem, is I wonder if they miss these pass rushers because they're waiting for Clowney to reply to their offer. Like, why is getting Clowney back such a big deal to you? I don't understand. Like that.
No. And I think the Chandler Jones deal wasn't that bad. It wasn't crazy. It wasn't like the Von Miller deal. So why couldn't you do that? If you're Cleveland,
Chandler Jones and Myles Garrett would have been wicked.
yeah, I don't. It just much like Houston, this trade is a good trade looking at it by itself, but then all the other moves just kind of make you scratch your head. Again, the Amari Cooper trade makes more sense now. That the Winovich trade was fine and the Taven Bryan signing is good, but you're missing something. You're missing a clear move, and the longer you wait, the more you're going to miss out more and more. So I just Cleveland is in danger of making this big splash and it just failing miserably.
So let me pose a hypothetical to you. Would you, if you were Stefanski and Andrew Berry in their current positions, would you rather have Deshaun Watson leading the team that you have now, except with no foreseeable future, or would you have rather let Watson go somewhere else, trade for someone with a fire inside of them like Gardner Minshew, keep the same kind of system, maybe with a little bit more pass game involved, except Minshew probably hits some of the throws that Baker doesn't, and you bring in other guys and assets. I mean, they're sitting in a position at either the 13th or 14th pick this year to potentially get Jordan Davis, to get one of these edges in one of the deepest edge classes that we've seen in a very long time, or even use that on a guy like Daniil Hunter or one of these guys that got moved like Mac or whatever. Like, what is Watson worth a team that could be led by someone just a slightly above average?
So the only thing I'll say is the AFC. So like everybody's talking about the AFC West, right? But the AFC as a whole is just going to be insane. I mean, look at the playoffs this year and how crazy they were. And now you have Russell Wilson in Denver. You have everything that the Chargers did. You have the Bills making moves. You have, if Zach Wilson takes a step forward. And it just – I think you go out and get the quarterback that can win a shootout. But you should have had other moves made already. I think that's what I would say. You should have had the pass rusher signed already. You should have had – if they make this move but they had signed – Chandler Jones, we keep coming back to. If they had signed, I'm going through, people on the list here. Zadarius just became available, so you can't say that. But if you had gone out and gotten, two more defensive pieces before doing this, and then signed a receiver, a lower end, a Jamison Crowder to replace Jarvis Landry or something, and everything else was set. I mean, you cut Austin Hooper. And yet you franchise tag David Njoku. That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, if you're going to change the system, it makes a little more sense now because Njoku is more the pass catcher.
I agree, but then one of the running backs should have been gone already. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, they're doing these moves out of order.
Yeah.
And I know you couldn't guarantee that you would have Watson, but you don't need Watson to sign a defensive piece. You had to have been under the assumption that there's a chance you didn't get him. So what was plan B? Like, I think hypothetically I would rather have, not counting any bad PR or anything like that aside, I would rather have Watson in the AFC. If I was in the NFC, I think it'd be a different conversation. But regardless, they're still missing a ton of moves because I don't personally think Watson, with everything that's happened, is the kind of guy that's going to attract players. I think, like, in a way he would have, but it's not like, I'm trying to think of a comparable of a recent, it's not, I know you don't like this guy, but it's not like Joe Burrow who seems like he's become a guy that's going to attract players to want to come play.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it's, historically Brady has been the guy that he takes pay cuts so that players come and play for the Buccaneers. As always the Patriots, but I don't think Watson's that guy right now, not with everything, going on and with the contract, the fully guaranteed contract he just signed. Like, that's Rodgers stuff. And I don't think Rodgers has ever been a guy, at least judging by their rosters, that has attracted players to come and play for him. So that's something as Cleveland you're going to have to live with, and it could backfire. It could backfire really strongly. Guys might say, if you're Za'Darius, I know he said he was going to sign, but they might say, you know what, I want the opportunity to hit him. I don't want the opportunity to play with him. I want the opportunity to get into the backfield and hit him. So I think it feels like,
You
I don't
put a
know.
target on your head.
Yeah, if you're Cleveland, even if you win the Super Bowl, it feels like there's going to be negative publicity about what you had to do it. I don't know. Maybe this opinion will change with time as we've been able to see things sort themselves out. But I wonder if they were to win the Super Bowl next year, there would be an asterisk next to it, and
Well,
people would be
but
like,
that's the next issue is if he gets suspended and for how long, are you really comfortable with Jacoby Brissett leading this team?
yeah, because they traded Case Keenum, right?
Yeah, they traded him to Buffalo for a seventh.
I don't know. I think Brissett is a good backup in this league, but you would think that there should have been a third player added to that mix.
Well, I meant to send this to you earlier, but there were reports that came out that they were looking at Mariota before Brissett. If you even think that Watson is going to get suspended, why is it not Mariota? Why? Like, that makes so much more sense.
Yeah. No, yeah, because if you start Brissett, he's a fine backup, but you're probably not in the AFC. You can't start Brissett and make the playoffs. Again, you don't have the defensive players. You don't have the pass rush. If you add another pass rusher, maybe, but I don't know. I mean, they're not in the. I assume Watson's going to get the longest suspension in history for that kind of thing. I would assume.
Although that's
You
not
know,
much of a record to beat there.
Well, I think it'll be at least 50% of the year, maybe even longer. I mean, maybe it's crazy, a whole season possibly. That would be pretty wild for the NFL to do it, but maybe the NFL looks at all the PR and stuff and thinks, we're going to actually do something right for a change. So, again, we're not getting into that, but there's going to be a suspension. At least you would think there's going to be a suspension. And it's going to be, a lengthy one. So as Cleveland, you're already saying, all right, well, this year might be a punt of a year, but another year, Myles Garrett down the line, another year of these guys that, Nick Chubb, if you keep him, he's a running back. How many years does he have before he breaks down? It
Well, I
just,
think having Hunt there helps that, but
right. But both of them, another year, Hunt's going to be 28, I think, next year. And I know he's not a full-time back anymore right now. And Chubb, they both split carries, and that's great. But they were both missed time last year. So you're wasting, this the time that Cleveland actually became relevant for a couple seasons is dangerously close to coming to an end. And I know that they just went and got their quarterback, but if Watson's suspended for most of next year, then the following year, maybe Garrett says he wants out. How does trading for Watson impact your current roster? I know they said Baker was a child and there was the whole issues with OBJ and all that stuff, but how was Baker regarded by most of the team? Was he viewed as one of the leaders? I honestly don't know. But now you're bringing in a guy that is going to divide the locker room, I would assume.
I mean, so the thing about Baker is that I think it's interesting to note that none of his teammates came to his defense when Cleveland was making all these statements. That would be my giant red flag there. Just circling back though, the interesting thing about Watson's contract is that it's fully guaranteed, and his base salary this year is $1 million. You know how bad that looks on Cleveland's part? First off, that he's probably going to be suspended, but then you help him out by not only guaranteeing his whole contract, but he doesn't lose money. His base salary is $1 million. This could be one of the most ethically messed up moves that we've seen in recent memory.
Yeah, and again, we didn't want to get into this, but that part is really bad. And why did you need to go do that? If you have to do all this stuff to make him agree to come to the team, then that it's probably not the right move. You know, I don't know.
Well, Cleveland, I know that you're passionate, and I get that the success has been extinct, non-existent, nowhere near. But is this really the way to do it? I I wouldn't think so. I mean, you already dragged Baker's name through the dirt, but that's why I brought up the hypothetical is I'd rather make a shorter run with some success with a guy like Minshew than have all these question marks around our organization. And to your point, is there an asterisk next to the Super Bowl?
Yeah. Do they
What
get
cost?
do they get called? You know, in my head, the first thing I thought of was that they sold their soul for this. You know, so like, if they win a Super Bowl with Watson, is it going to be viewed as like exactly at what cost? You know, this isn't Tampa Bay going out and getting Brady and paying a ton of money, or this isn't Denver going and getting Russell Wilson. This is going and getting like, you're corrupting your fan base, you're corrupting your morals. It's a calculated move, but you have to know that if you win the Super Bowl, there's a chance that the fans just don't care at that point and they're happy that they have a Super Bowl, but there's also a chance that the fans don't want a Super Bowl with Watson. Like, it is a dangerous game that they're playing.
I get that there's still a chance that Watson is innocent, but the fact that there was even, again, this is assuming that nothing happened, which I don't think is the case, but again, it's just more the fact that there was still something there at all.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, it's not even about whether he did it or not. It's the public, the court of public opinion in this day and age can doom you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so with that many counts, you assume he did it, but I mean, there's probably a chance that he is innocent. However, for our purposes, it doesn't matter because even if there's a chance that he did it, you can't, I don't know. It just, in my head, you can't do this. You can't give up this record trade when there's a chance that he did something as horrible as this, you know, and, you know, you go on Twitter, at least in my eyes, and you see people saying, well, the Steelers did it with Ben. Yeah, that got swept under the rug. That was not good either. You know, he settled that outside of court. That just, people using examples of stuff that have no idea what they're talking about. It just is like, if you're Cleveland, is it really worth it? And I know we keep rehashing this, but in my eyes, I agree. I think you should have kept the picks, and you know, maybe people would have looked at it and said, oh, well, they should have gone and went and got Watson. But I would be shocked if that would have been the narrative. You know, I don't know.
Like for Cleveland, let's assume they never enter the Watson sweepstakes, Baker is still the Cleveland quarterback. Then maybe they bring competition, but at the end of the day, Baker is still there. With their first round pick this year, you could go out and get a guy like Jordan Davis, assuming he's still sitting there, who is incredible against the run. First off, AFC North might be one of the best running team or divisions in football. That helps there. But then Davis goes out and tests like an absolute freak and tells the media that he's working on his pass rush moves. That is an inside rush. Forget the other side. That's an inside rush that Myles Garrett has never played with in his career. But to the Watson point, and this is how it connects, is Jordan Davis is a super, super high character guy that Cleveland would love. Him and Devontae Wyatt stuck around after the D-line drills to watch their linebacker teammates work out at the combine. You just don't see that.
Yeah, you think like, and even if they didn't go Jordan Davis, so you could have drafted one of the top receivers and had Amari Cooper and fill in the blank and Donovan Peoples-Jones, and you just create a good offense. And whether you're a Baker believer or not, which I guess I would err towards more that I think he's much better than he was last year, although that still is probably just slightly above average. But nobody would have faulted you for not making the trade, but now a lot of people are going to fault you for making the trade. And it's just, we can go on and on about this and keep talking about it, but it's something that now Cleveland has to live with. And, like I can't think enough that some of these guys might say, anybody with a wife or a daughter in the NFL might say, I want a chance to hit them.
Yeah.
Like, I want a chance. Let me go to an AFC North team so I play them twice a year so I can get this, unsportsmanlike conduct hit on him, helmet to helmet. It doesn't matter. You know, it just, it just feels like this is not a good move.
I mean, at the end of the day, to kind of start wrapping up here, is when you look at the type of football player strictly that Deshaun Watson is, the package that they got in return, meaning Houston, that deal makes sense. The problem here is what's going on around Watson. It is the lack of moves that Houston is making. It is at what cost for Cleveland. So, yes, does the package make sense? Yeah. Is it going to work out for either team? Who knows?
Yeah, you could go on and on. So I will just stop there and keep an eye out for our mock draft 3.0, which after this trade, I don't see another first being moved until draft day because I can't think of a player that's rumored to be traded. That would include a first unless Baker gets a shocking first. So just keep an eye out for our mock draft 3.0. And